Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Toby, Senior Principal Engineer for Digital Interconnection at Equinix. I have with me today Mohan Atreya.
Pleasure to meet you.
And could you introduce yourself a little bit, and
Sure.
then we'll get into it?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Mohan Atreya. I lead products and solutions at Rafay. Been with the company around 5 years at this point of time. One of the early people in the company. And we partners with Equinix and enjoy the relationship we have.
We love our partners. We have a lot of them, so I'm afraid I don't know what Rafay does.
Sure.
Can you tell me a little bit about Rafay?
Sure, absolutely. So the primary problem we solve for our customers is essentially in two areas. One is how do I provide self-service experiences for developers when they want access to environments and Kubernetes clusters. So the experienced developers, platform teams want to provide the developers literally, practically speaking, click a button and it comes up. Right? They don't need to know the nuances of Terraform, access to credentials, maybe shoot themselves in the foot in the process.
Right.
So kind of abstract everything away, and the platform teams templatize all that, and they provide a very simple experience for the developers and application teams.
So that experience, what you get there, is that like a Kubernetes namespace? Is it kind of more than that?
Yeah, it's more than that.
Are there services that come with it?
Correct. So this is a choice that the platform teams land up making. So of course, the smallest thing they can do is a namespace, like a namespace as a service. Some people go down what is called the cluster as a service, like an entire team gets a whole cluster. Some people live in between that. We call that a workspace, where a platform team says, look, I don't want to be in the business of managing the namespace. I'll give you a quota. You decide how many namespaces you want, but along with this comes access control, right? How do I make sure you as a developer only have access to the namespaces you have, that you created, right? And you're in this weird spot between a cluster administrator and a namespace administrator. You're kind of in between that. So we do that. That's a really cool feature that organizations like. Then, of course, go beyond that. Things like, how do I get a full environment? Kubernetes plus maybe a managed database plus object storage, things outside Kubernetes, which may be critical for the app developer. So all the way up, the key thing in this is, how do I impose the controls around it? Because the developer may not know all the nuances of how things can go wrong. So how do I put the guardrails? The platform team comes and makes decisions on, you can change these things you can't change. And the policies could be cost, could be security, could be, like schedules, like, automatically shut down things at a certain time. It could be any of those.
Oh, so it also includes the life cycle of the resources.
Exactly. Go from version 1 to version 2. Like, think about a customer who has like version 1 of a test bed which has got vulnerabilities, and they want to sweep everyone to a version 2.
Right.
They probably
That's a hard problem.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's a workflow problem.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm hearing from you is you take a lot of the complexity that we throw at developers, especially early in Kubernetes, right? We say, here's your namespace and Helm.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to bring a better experience to developers.
Correct.
That maybe a lot of the same things happen, but more automated.
Correct.
But maybe there's less for them to think about.
Correct. Yeah. Maybe a simple way to think about this is most organizations, the platform teams literally have two kind of personas. People who build this tooling and automation, the best practices, they encapsulate that. And they are the ones probably at KubeCon where they understand the nuances, they care about the nuances, they keep up with the new trends. That's 1% of the...
1%? At best.
Exactly.
Right.
The rest of them, and if for Kubernetes to be successful and pervasive, simplicity has to be there, right? Turnkey experiences, so that any developer who is mostly focused on their application, they don't care about everything else. Everything else just shows up when they need it. Yeah.
So we've been talking about developers. Does this extend into production then?
Oh yeah.
So you also get some lifecycle control of your production assets.
Correct.
Does that also include like the deploy lifecycle?
So we try and stay away from the app lifecycle. Sure. It's kind of like a solved problem. It's a lot of players there. We're our partners. So just like Equinix, we have to work well. So there are some areas we don't dabble in, like security is one, where we have partners, and it's not something that we do well in.
Right.
So So yeah, the deploy stuff is usually outside our scope. We leave it, and people have strong opinions there. I want to deploy, and we try and stay away from that. Yeah.
So you're kind of almost taking some choice away from the developer, but what they get back is some convenience and an ability to focus on their product.
Correct.
And so I wonder how you think about that in your product work, like when you're working with your engineers, because very often when I work with infrastructure engineers, they want to build it in-house.
Correct.
And here you show up with a lot of this stuff solved.
Correct.
So how do you convince those engineers that are like experts in Kubernetes and they see a path to building what you've done?
Yeah.
But how do you convince them to buy a product and use it?
Yeah.
As opposed to doing it
It's a very good question. So it's in fact the number one question we guys had to grapple with in conversations with people, and they had to grapple with. In the past, it used to be a build versus buy decision, right? And in the last year or so, it's converted more into what I'd call as, if I use Rafay as a building block, I can get to my outcome faster.
Yes.
Right? They started looking at Rafay more like, hey, this is just one of my colleagues, practically speaking, right? And the things we do are perceived by those people now as a drudgery. Like, I don't want to do that. It was fun 4 years ago, and it's not fun anymore. I want to work on this cooler thing that has come out, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of so as Kubernetes matures, there are certain things that are no longer interesting to a lot of strong technologists. They want to work on hard problems.
Well, they're no longer differentiated.
Exactly.
That's the phrase I like to use with engineers, right? It's undifferentiated lifting.
Correct.
Like us doing our own platform like yours doesn't make a ton of sense unless we have very specific things that your product can't do. But for most people, they really need the same thing.
Correct. So in general, I would say 99% of the people, we find that their needs are fairly similar. 1% where they do really unique things with Kubernetes or infrastructure, they may not be a great fit for those, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we're here at KubeCon today.
Yeah.
And, well, you're here, and so have you brought your crew? Are folks here to kind of share your product with the world?
Oh, yeah.
KubeCon?
Yeah. So we have a booth. We actually have 2 booths. So since we also have, we have contributors, big contributors to open source. So we have multiple CNCF projects. One of them we have, it's called a project called Parallels, which solves the access control and governance problem to Kubernetes clusters operating behind firewalls. So for folks interested in seeing that, stop by in the CNCF area for a project called Parallels. We have people staffing that. We also have a booth for the commercial offering. The Rafay platform, we have a bunch of people manning the booth. I think it's seat 31, number. And at 4:30 today, there's a giveaway.
A giveaway?
It's a nice drone. I've been eyeing it myself. I don't think I'm eligible to...
Yeah, I've been looking at these Lego sets we've been giving away, and I'm going, well, I want one, but I'm not eligible.
Exactly.
So you mentioned some open source work. So you have engineers at your company contributing to an open source project.
Correct.
So what's that been like with working with the CNCF and kind of, how do you think about the balance of open source contribution to open source and making sure that your product is differentiated?
Yeah. So we've taken a interesting position, very different from many other companies here. It's a business model decision, right? The thing we open source is actually a feature or a component in our larger platform. And we kind of went about this in a completely different direction. A lot of companies start with open source and then they have to draw a line and say, well, I'm going to commercialize the rest of it. We didn't do it that way. We went the reverse way, where as customers used our platform, some of them said, well, it'd be nice if you can contribute something back to CNCF. You shouldn't just be taking, right, and using. So we said, hey, this is a nice component. It's an unsolved problem, because our philosophy and thinking is, I don't want to push out something where maybe there are 4 other options that kind of sort of solve the problem. It's got to be something unique that helps people. So the Parallels project, we notice there's no one solving anything with access in Kubernetes. Access governance, the RBAC federation, the painful area for people.
It's not glamorous work.
Right. And then, when COVID kind of hit and everyone was remote, what we noticed was the usage kind of went like a hockey stick on our side, right?
Yeah.
Because every developer every platform engineer working from home just wants seamless access to their stuff, right? Who wants to go on a Bastion or VPN, right? So we said this would be a good one to kind of contribute. And we worked with the CNCF governance committee, and it was a conversation like, hey, look, can you teach us what it takes to do this? And we have no commercial interest, as in there is no commercial option for Parallels.
Okay.
It's open source and that's it. It's more like Prometheus and all that, where there's no commercial option.
I really like what you said there, though, because I've seen that, especially since CNCF came around, there's a little bit more of a tendency of people to go, well, I'm going to go start my open source project with my first line of code, and then magically a community will appear, which is not really how any of these projects appeared. What you did was you went and you created something valuable, and then you brought that to the open source community, and you found fast adoption that way.
Correct, exactly. And now, we don't go, so it also keeps things very clean, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to ever think about, do I put this in the open source or not? It's a simple decision, right? It's the same code base. We have a hosted offering. It's a part of a bigger platform. We have no interest in commercializing Parallels. We just keep giving what we can.
Well, you integrate it in your product, but your competitors might integrate it as well.
So they might. We, in fact, want them to do it because, our thinking there is, because the concept, it takes people a while to grok it. Once they do, there's no going back.
Right.
And we have many people, in fact, when we were at KubeCon in Europe, I did not know there were so many European users of Parallels when I was swamped there, right?
Yeah.
So, holy cow, I didn't even know you guys exist, right?
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah. And we also diligent about, no bait and switch, right? It's clean, it's open source, and if you come and ask for support, we say, sorry, maybe someone else will. We'll fix stuff as soon as we can. So it's treated like how Prometheus is, how, there's no upsell option for that.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
That's kind of what we believe in, like open source. I grew up in a time when open source was like, you got to volunteer, you got to give back. It's your way of giving back. Yeah.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Do you find that your leadership team understands that? And it wants this to continue happening?
Yes. So it's a balance, right? So it's we carve out budget capacity to do that. For example, why do we lobby for a booth here? Why do we staff it? We get nothing out of it, except awareness that this kind of a concept is even possible. Right. Help teach people that, hey, you could be looking at doing RBAC Federation a very different way, right? Access can be solved in this unique way. And our goal there is to teach the larger community. If someone else says, hey, this is really cool, I want to integrate in my product, so be it. Yep.
Right, yeah.
We want more people to contribute, not just us. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about how do I interface the software? Is it like YAML driven? Is it API driven?
Great question. So we've taken a very interesting approach, which I think a lot of companies will start doing. Many of them are already there. Our belief is we have to speak the language of our users, right? Some people speak YAML. Some people talk APIs. Some people say, I want to only talk Backstage. So we have plugins for Backstage. Some people want to only do stuff through GitOps. Some people are big Terraform fanboys. We speak all of them. Right?
Yeah.
Of course, we have a UI for everything too. Everyone does, right?
But somewhere that comes to some common interface.
Oh, yeah. So everything gets funneled down to our APIs underneath the covers.
Okay.
Right? But we had to present these first-class interfaces. So everything is tier one. The 5 things I talked about, they're all tier one, which means when we release an enhancement, a feature, our engineers had to support all these interfaces, which means, there's no second-class citizen.
Yeah.
Otherwise we should not do it, right?
It's like equity of access.
Exactly. And that's our thinking behind it. So it's a painful discussion inside the company. Everyone looks at metrics, right? We of course have a lot of people using Terraform,
right? Our
Terraform provider. So the instinctive feeling is maybe I should do that first and get this out. And we had to hold the line and say, no, guys, you will pay the price later, right? If we
I have to do that with the products I'm working on. I basically said nobody's writing a UI until the API is rock solid.
Yeah. exactly.
And it was basically just to do that, to make sure that the API worked for everyone.
Right.
And not just the UI or just Terraform.
Exactly. I think that's a great way to look at it, because the UI is not the only customer of the API, right?
Yeah. And it's so easy to get upside down on that.
Yeah. So that's been a hard decision inside, right? And we hope the number of interfaces just doesn't keep growing. I mean, this is a very vibrant community. So 2 years ago, we had 3 interfaces. Then we added the 4th, and we added the 5th, and I hope there's no more.
But with that common interface, it's not each one is kind of an incremental cost instead of having to rebuild from scratch every time.
Yes. Right. And the design philosophies are different, right? Like the way Terraform behaves is different from how REST APIs operate.
Yeah.
So how do you marshal, unmarshal stuff? Giving a first-class experience, because a Terraform user can't say, hey, this feels weird, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered pretty much all your product. So what are you personally getting here at KubeCon? Like, what has been your favorite part of sessions or the show floor here?
Yeah.
I mean, beside your own product.
Sure.
Clearly you love. So.
Yeah. I mean, the opportunity to meet like-minded people and learn. I think it's a fantastic learning opportunity. I look forward to this every year. It's fascinating to see people talk about their journeys.
Yeah.
Their learnings, right? And, it's unlike certain other conferences which are very salesy, marketing heavy. Here we get a little bit of the reality check, right? Like, people are actually talking about their mistakes they made.
Yeah, I love that.
Like, the humbleness of people, sharing their experiences. They could have not, they don't need to talk about it, but they do. You made a mistake here. It didn't make sense for us. We course corrected. So I love these stories. I think human beings love telling stories and listening to stories, and I think that's what I get out of this. And meeting people, which I think has been very hard over the last few years. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, I love that. That's like a really nice testament to the community that's been built up around Kubernetes. That I think is really instrumental to its success as a product.
Yes. Completely agree.
Have you seen that? You see that around your product with your open source stuff, but you also see it sounds like, in the larger Kubernetes community.
Yeah. And that's why we're here. We're going to be here at KubeCon in Europe. We also do a bunch of these, KCDs, regional KCDs where we can, because not everyone gets to go to these events. Budget issues and other issues, travel issues. So we go do that at many places. We also are big into these online, like live streams and all of that. I think we have a developer advocate leader in our company that said, man, I did 200 live streams in the last 2 years. And I said, oh my God.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. And all that is free, right? It's open on the internet. Anyone can learn. Anyone can. So we just want to engage with people. I think that's a fun part of CNCF.
Yeah, it's kind of leaning into a generative culture.
Correct.
Right, where we kind of make the pie bigger, as opposed to be like, this is mine.
Yes.
I'm going to make the pie bigger so that I can have a bigger piece.
Yes.
Then other people get a bigger piece too, but we all win.
Yeah. And not only that, I think it drives a culture of, it forces you to be on your toes, right? Because there's so much innovation happening around you that you got to keep up, or you're done
and
for
it's fun.
2 years.
I can tell you're having fun with this.
Yeah.
I also really enjoy that part of, especially open source.
Yes.
And this kind of era of open source as well.
Yes. And you got to be so much better than open source to make it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The audience is a hard audience. They expect a lot. Which is good for us.
They ask the hard question.
Yeah.
What's the hardest question you've got from a customer?
Mostly the one you asked, which is why shouldn't I build this myself?
Right.
And our usual answer to that is, well, you can. The question is whether you should.
Right. Don't you have other things to build?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've got a mile-long backlog. How much of that do you want to whack away at, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
my pleasure. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
And I hope you have a great KubeCon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Appreciate it. Pleasure. Yeah. Thank you.